Hey everybody, so in this video we're going to be taking a look at Google Cloud OAuth, trying to access the Google Drive API, and we're going to kind of contain this inside of a FastAPI project. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So first I'm going to be using PyCharm. I'm going to go ahead and click on New Project, FastAPI, and then here I'm just going to give it a different name, so Google OAuth. And we are going to use a virtual environment. There are some client libraries from Google that we're going to have to download, and I don't want them all over my system. So a virtual environment is highly recommended. So go ahead and click on Create. And I put it on my other screen here. Okay, so you can see here we got our project, and PyCharm is doing its indexing, whatever it does. So here we've got our standard template for the FastAPI. So we don't need both of these. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this second one here. In reality, this is going to change here in a little bit. So once that's squared away, first thing you want to do here is kind of get everything set up beforehand, before we start doing the code. So here in the background, I've got my Google Drive, and I've got a folder called testing, and then I've got a file in here called test.json. I'm doing it this way because I don't want the entire world to see that I have client files and stuff like that inside of my drive, so I'm doing this on a different folder. You can feel free to set yours up in the same way, and that way your code is going to match one-to-one by the end of this, but I'll try to cover, if you want to do just the root of the project where a file may reside. The next thing you want to do is sign up for Google Cloud Console. So Google Cloud Console will give you a free trial. It'll give you a certain amount of dollars. So in this case, you can see $400 credit. It lasts for I think 90 days. But I'm pretty sure that the Drive API is free. Please double check it though. I don't want you to blame me if you're doing something with it and then you end up getting charged for it. I'm pretty sure it's free, but please double check. So once you've got to this page and you've created your Google Cloud account, what you want to do is go up here, click on that, and you'll likely only have My First Project, right? So we don't want to do any of this stuff underneath this base, auto-generated project. So you can see here I've already created another project for this. To create a new project yourself, you're going to click on New Project. You're going to give it a project name, the organization that you created it under, and then the location, same thing. And then click on Create. I've already done this, like I said, so once you do that, in the upper left hand corner, and this clearly didn't load, so let me go ahead and just refresh that. There we go. So make sure you click on your whatever project that you just created was. In my case, mine is OAuth example. So once you've gotten that squared away, I'm going to go ahead and click onto the search bar and type in Drive API. And you can see about halfway down here, we've got the Google Drive API. Click on that. Now mine, I already have it set up to do this. Yours will probably say turn on API or something like that, right? So you're going to click on that, turn it on, and then it should convert over to a manage button like this. So once that's squared away, go ahead and click on the manage. It'll take you to this screen. So this particular screen is not super important for us for this demo, but the credentials and OAuth consent screen, both of these are important for us. So the first thing we'll have to do here is go to the OAuth consent screen. And what this is going to do is set up that screen that when a user is trying to authenticate with their Google account, it'll tell them, hey, these are the permissions that we're going to have access to. Please accept and allow access or not. Right? I'm pretty sure everybody who's done a Google authentication has seen that before. I've already done this, so my screen looks like this. Yours will likely have something along the lines of create new consent screen or something like that. But once you click on the creation, your screen will start to look similar to this. So app information, whatever your app name is, which in this case for me is OAuth example. My email for the support email. I created the logo, but you don't have to. And then scrolling down through, developer contact information, again, is just my email. Save and continue. This part is actually really important. So we have to give access to these particular scopes. So to do so, you're going to click on Add or Remove Scopes. And then inside of this little filter, search area, you're going to type in Drive, and then the first option here for me is Google Drive API. So then you can see here the 4 checkboxes that I have. So it's auth docs, auth drive, auth drive.file, and auth drive metadata read only. Those are the 4 that you're going to need. Once you've checked those off, go ahead and click on update, and then yours should look like this after that's done. Save and continue. Test users, I put my own email in there, so obviously use yours. Save and continue, and then here's a summary page. So now that you've got your consent screen squared away, we now have to do a credentials. So I've obviously done this a couple of times. I'm going to go ahead and just delete these guys because they're not super important for me. Did I spell it wrong? There we go. Okay, so once you get to this screen, it'll look like this. There'll be nothing there. Go ahead and click on Create Credentials, OAuth Client ID. Application type for us, we're going to be using a desktop app. And here I'll just call this example 1 and click on Create. Notice here we've got in this little pop-up screen, you're going to want to download the JSON from here. So click on Download, and for this, in the root of your project, so I'm going to click into that, in the root, and then change the name. This is a really long name, you probably don't want it. So I'm just going to call it creds.json, save. Okay, so once we've got that squared away, we can finally get to the coding part. So let's go ahead and switch over to the code. So first what we want to do is set up the credential handler. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new Python file at the root of the project and call this credential handler. So first thing we want to do is go ahead and create a variable called scopes, and this is kind of a global variable for this particular file. Go ahead and pause the video and copy this into your code, because these are the 4 permissions that we had enabled during that consent process. Next, what we want to do is go ahead and create a function to request, like a remote request, to get the credentials. So def request creds. And first thing we're going to do is create a credential variable and set that equal to none. And then we're going to check, so if os.path.exists creds.json, which is that file I just downloaded, right? We can kind of see it over here on the left. So if it exists, I'm going to pass for now. Else, we're going to go ahead and say print credentials not available. Whoops, or not present, present probably better. sys.exit, exit code of 1, right? 0 is fine, 1 or any other number means there's something wrong. Okay, so if it does exist though, we're going to create a user flow, so equals, and at this point actually, hang on a second. At this point we have to actually install the Google Client library. So go ahead and open up the terminal. And here is your command. It's pip install -- upgrade the Google API client for Python, the httplib2, and the OAuth lib. So go ahead and pause the video and grab that and go ahead and do the install. And I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. The actual install doesn't take very long for this, at least as far as mine is concerned. The indexing can sometimes take a minute, so I may pause the video at this point to allow it to index. Okay, so yeah, so I had to pause it to go ahead and let it index, but it's done now. So kind of moving back along here, if the creds.json exists, we're going to go ahead and create the user flow. So flow is equal to installed app flow, and then we're going to go ahead and have to import this. So from the Google OAuth lib flow dot from client secrets file creds.json, and then we're going to pass scopes. Next, we're going to go ahead and get those creds from the flow run local server, and then here we can just say port equals 0. I don't think that really matters though. Once we've gotten those creds, we're going to go ahead and create a token file. So with open token.json with the write flag, as token, token.write, and then here it's going to be creds.toJSON. And once we've written that file, we're going to return credentials, and this is actually another one from Google. And here we're going to go down to this guy, OAuth2 credentials. Dot from authorized user file, token.json, passing in scopes. Okay, so that should be enough to kind of get going as far as getting just something up and running so we can see if we're doing it right. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is in our main, I'm just going to say basically do this before getting everything squared away, or the scaffolding setup I should say. So credential handler dot request creds. And then we can go ahead and run our application. And there you see it pops up a screen. I'm going to go ahead and use mine. There are the 4 permissions that we want to have access for. So allow, and we're good. And the application startup is complete. Now what I want to point out here is that if we make a change, right, FastAPI will attempt to reload the server. So let's just say I put a space after this, right, and then I click off of the screen. Notice it reloaded and it's asking me again for these credentials, right? So I'll go ahead and go do the flow again, right? But that will get really annoying as we're typing. So what we want to do now is basically say, if the credentials already exist, then go ahead and try to use those instead. So back in our credentials handler, I'm going to go ahead and make another method. So def get creds. So in this case, I'm going to say if os path exists token.json, which is the file that we've created from this one, creds is equal to credentials dot from authorized user file token.json scopes. And at this point, we want to check to make sure that they're not expired. So if creds and creds.expired and creds.refresh token, right? So basically, if it has a refresh token and it's expired, we're going to go ahead and attempt to creds.refresh, which is a function, and we're going to pass in request, like so, with the parentheses. This is another one provided from Google. And this one here is going to be Google OAuth transport request. And then once that's squared away, return creds. If that token file is not available, we're going to go ahead and return request creds, right? So basically call this method that we created earlier. So now inside of here, instead of calling request, we're going to call get. And you'll notice here that this is actually going to run and refresh itself once I click off of it. But notice it didn't prompt me for another sign-in, right? So that kind of helps with not having to do that every time. Okay, so we've got the credentials kind of squared away right now. So the next thing we probably want to do is start attempting to get stuff from Google Drive. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new Python file, and I'm just going to call it drive. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a function called search file, and we're going to pass in a file name. So first thing we have to do is get the credentials. So creds is equal to credential handler dot get creds. Then we're going to build the service, which is build drive v3, comma, credentials equals creds. And this build function is another Google provided discovery build. And that's basically saying create a Google Drive service that will allow us to interact with Google Drive. Okay, so now at this point, I'm going to use a query like so. And what this is saying is that, hey, this folder ID, which is that testing folder I mentioned earlier, and a name of whatever the file name is. You're probably not going to know what your IDs for anything is right now. So instead, let me type the next line actually. So results is equal to service.files.list q equals query dot execute. Okay, so because you likely don't know what your IDs are, instead of passing query, you can just leave that as empty parentheses, and this will just grab everything from your Google Drive. And based on our output, in a second, which I'll type up, you'll be able to see the file name and their folder name and all that, along with their associated IDs. So you'll be able to modify your query to match what your Google Drive says. So, but I'm going to leave that like that because, like I said, I have client stuff in there that I don't want to expose to the world. So results is equal to that. Items is equal to results.get files, and they're going to pass in an empty list. So items is basically going to contain all of the individual items that are found inside of the drive. So if not items, meaning that it's empty, print no files found, return. Otherwise, we're going to say print files for I in items, print, and I'm going to use a U formatter for this, 0, 1, like so. Dot format, in this case, I name, comma, I ID. Return items. Okay, so go ahead and type all of this out. And like I said, you're not going to know specifically what your file and file ID or your folder and their IDs are, right? So what you're going to do your first time running through this is delete this guy, right? And once you do that and you run this code, you'll see everything with their associated IDs, and then you can grab the folder that you want, and then you can place it in here. If you just want to use the root, you don't have to have this portion of the query, right? You can just get rid of it. If you just want to use the file name, that's fine too. But I'm going to keep mine there. So yeah, so now let's go ahead and test this out. So in our main, I'm going to go ahead and modify this to be a search. And I'll change the name here to search and return drive.search file. So we have to pass in a file name. So for me, I can just say test.json. You can hard code whatever file is available for you as well. And let's go ahead and let this reload. And then I'll open up another tab. So localhost, mine's running on 8000/search. Enter. And there's my file. So obviously though, we probably don't want to have our file name as hard-coded. So let's go ahead and go back to our main, and let's make this a query parameter. So that obviously doesn't exist yet, but I'll go ahead and make it now. So file name, and that is a string. So if we were to attempt to do this again, you'd see we get an error. So now we have to provide a file name. So file name, so question mark file name equals test.json, and there we go, we got our file back. So the next thing we'll probably want to do is after we get our file or searching for files, right, we probably want to download said files. So let's go ahead and create a download method. So def download file, and here I'm going to say file ID and, whoops, not and, file ID, comma, file name, and that'll be an optional. So basically, once we get the file ID, which we got from right here, or if we don't know it for some reason or another, we can grab it based on the file name. So, download file, and first thing we want to do is attempt to download the file based on the file ID. So if file ID, we're going to say creds is equal to credential handler dot get creds. Service is equal to build drive v3, and credentials is equal to creds. Right, similar to what we did before. Request is equal to service.files.getMedia file ID. Notice camel case here is equal to our parameter of file ID. Go ahead and scroll down a little bit. Next, we're going to have a file which is equal to io.bytes, io, and that is with parentheses on the end. We're going to create a downloader, and this is based on a class provided by Google. We're going to pass in the file in the request, and then we just have to import that from Google. And then we're going to have a flag, because basically we're going to be downloading this in chunks. So while not done, status comma done is equal to, let me go ahead and scroll down a little bit again, downloader dot next chunk. And then we're just going to print out our status. So print f download int, whoops, I didn't mean to do that, status dot progress times 100. Once that done flag is toggled, we're then going to return file.get value, which is actually all lowercase. Okay. Next, we're going to do an elif file name. Right? So if they did provide the file name, we're going to get back the list of files provided from the search file method that we created before. Now, there's a little bit of handling that we have to do now. So first, I'm going to scroll back up to our search file. So if no items are found, we're going to return an empty list. Okay? Now back down to here, if len files is equal to 0, right? So nothing was provided back. Then we're going to say print could not find file name. Return. Elif the len of files is greater than 1, right? So if there was more than one match, right, then we have a problem, right? Which is file name, come on, is not unique. Which one are we trying to download, right? Return. Otherwise, we have just a list that is one item or one element. So file ID is equal to files, position 0 for that single element, and then its ID property. And then we're going to return download file ID. Right, so basically recursively call this function, and instead of coming down through here, it'll go through here on that recursive call. And lastly, if neither one of these things are provided, print no file ID or file name provided. And that covers, I think, all the scenarios that we need. So now let's go ahead and go back to our main. I'm going to go ahead and copy this method here just to save some typing and change this to download. And change this to download file. Now obviously we have to have a file name and a file ID, so I'll go ahead and add that. The file ID does not exist yet, so I'll go ahead and add file ID as another parameter, like so. Now, based on the code that we've written, right, file ID could be null or none because we may only know the file name, right? So, and if the file name can also be none, assuming that we pass in a file ID, right? So either one of these, right, they're both optional. So let's go ahead and make them that way. So I'm going to say pipe none equals none, and same thing here. So pipe none equals none, which basically says both of these parameters are optional. Okay, so let's go ahead and run that. So I'll go ahead and duplicate this tab. So here's our search, and then this is going to be our download, so I'll just change that to download. So we'll base it on the file name first, and there it is, perfect. Next, we're going to try with the ID. So instead of file name, we're going to say file ID equals, and paste it in. And perfect, did it again. Now what happens if we don't pass either? Null. Right, go back to our application, check the logs, no file ID or file name provided. Perfect. And that's pretty much it. I mean, you could probably make this a little prettier with error handling as far as giving back valid response codes and all that. But the point of this video was more so how to use Google's OAuth to interact with the Google Drive API. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. Do let me know if you have any other requests in the future. I will try to make videos for those as well. So thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.